Whereas the highlights of your campaign happen in the combat and the story, mine all appear in the campsites. The campsite's visual aesthetic is far too important for me when a companion's affinity meter wants to go to the next level.
Smell your sweat. I mean to taste it.
For these events, I simply need the best setting and a certain level of coziness to comfort my rotting Sims brain. I have rated all the 17 possible campsites in the game, and remember guys, these ratings of mine are objective, so don't take it too hard. I rate your favorite campsite as the lowest. The criteria I've set up for the ranking are as serious as the title of this video. So the criteria are atmosphere, lighting, general availability of new dialogue and cutscenes, which all mashed together is coziness. So yeah, basically all campsites are rated based on their coziness.
Cock.
Number 17, the generic Owlbear Cave. There is just not a lot going on this campsite, unfortunately. Compared to the other campsites' details and personal touches added by the group, the Owlbear Cave is as barren as my job reference page. Many players probably didn't even know about this camp since it is so weirdly and specifically tied to the Owlbear Cave area, which you will probably only spend like a minuscule amount of time. Unless you were one of those who fought the Owlbear Cave and need to heal, shame on you. Other than that, boring, nothing going on, and ruins my foreplay with Lae'zel. Number 16, the Crashylek campsite. On a broad view, this campsite should be much higher in the rating, as it does have nice atmosphere and lighting. But immersion-wise, and you are going to notice me mention this quirk to some of the other campsites as well, is the fact that the feeling of safety when setting up a camp inside an enemy base ruins my immersion a little bit. A safe haven is of the utmost importance. Another point I would like to mention is the missed opportunity of this campsite. It feels a bit disappointing that this site didn't use the beautiful design of the monastery, and instead threw the gang inside the random room with minimal architectural resemblance of the monastery itself. The potential was there, but unfortunately, no. Number 15, the Whispering Depths Cave, aka the one tiny spot of a giant spider-infested cave that is not filled with giant spiders. Same reason as the Owlbear Cave, although the added ambience touch by the littering skulls gives it some bonus points. The idea of some respite after a battle inside the spider colony just breaks my immersion of a safe haven in my playthrough. And if my immersion breaks, I might as well dance with Will as the Dark Urge, because that makes sense. Number 14, the Baldur's Gate Harbor/Port. Now hear me out, the view of the sea with the bustling city on the background is nice. You even have a small chapel, but my idea of setting up camp in the middle of a port to what is Baldur's Gate's equivalent of the favelas is not what I would consider cozy. And how even is the gang able to set up camp there? Isn't there like, a refugee crisis in the city? But my extraordinary gang of heroes get the protagonist treatment.
Orders of Lord Gortash. Refugees are no longer allowed in the city. Turn around.
Number 13, the Blighted Village Blacksmith or Apothecary area. This one is honestly not so bad as long as you ignore the horde of sprinting goblins around the roof. It gets some bonus points for being nice and tight, and giving out the idea that the gang take refuge in an abandoned shack sort of area. The interior design makes the place seem well lived in, and giving an idea how the village was before. The goblins came and made it blighted. Also the fact that Lae'zel and Shadowheart are both placed together behind the wall out of sight from the main group is an unintentional narrative choice I now claim lore accurate. Number 12, the Moonrise Tower's basement. I love this place. The extreme clutter situation and tight layout gives it a nice hoarder vibe, if that makes sense. There are a lot of details, and the idea that this works as some sort of infiltration camp, since you can only get this if you are still in good terms with the Absolute, makes it a nice narrative point when spending the night at this basement. Although the reason it is a little further down the list is purely because of the fact that this is the basement of your main enemies in Act 2. It almost feels like the guard saw your merry band of totally cult members, by the way, and decided to throw them in the room where Ketheric stores his gifts he gets from his followers. Number 11, the Gauntlet of Shar campsite. Man, I love setting up camp in a cultist base that kidnaps and brainwashes little girls to become terrorists. It's got some nice scenery and one of the more cooler lighting than most other cave-like campsites. And in most players' first playthrough, like mine, setting up camp before the next edgy trial gave it more immersion and a nice narrative. Talking with Shadowheart and letting her explain her connection behind the Sharan cult just felt really cool in this campsite. It even has a giant statue of Shard that watches over you, like a twisted form of a nightlight. Number 10, the Overgrown Chapel. This may seem like a weird placement since it is very similar to the other cave-like campsites. But this one I place at number 10 because I believe it has a special place for many players. The first time you enter the dungeon on your playthrough, and after the traps, the undead soldiers, prospecting bandits and the eerie ambience with great lighting, it just felt really relaxing setting up camp and taking a nice long breath.
It's just that I happen to be what's the best way to put this? A cock.
Number 9, the Shadow-Cursed Campsite. The Shadow-Cursed Lands is the drastic shift in the world from the Emerald Grove area. The camp's red grass, leafless trees and spooky music, combined with Halsin's bedtime stories of the region, was a nice introduction of the entirety of Act 2. It gets the benefit of safety with surrounding stone cliffs and plenty of light to keep the shadow creatures outside. Number 8, Outside Last Light Inn Campsite. I don't know why you would camp outside when you rest at the lodging area, but I suppose lore-wise Jaheira's small army took most of the nice beds. This camp also has the best parts of the Shadow-Cursed camp, however inside the safety of the light barrier. The layout is in my opinion one of the best, and surrounding stone cliffs and the safety of the water adds to the coziness level. Halsin's world-building dialogue is also there, and is it only me, but for some reason both the Shadow-Cursed camp and the Last Light Inn campsite just makes me reminisce of watching one of those SpongeBob episodes which happened during the nighttime. Number 7, the Grimforge campsite. I don't know how Gale is able to sleep, but I can guarantee you the 1 foot out the blanket technique won't work here. However, the scenery and general lighting of the camp just made me fall in love with it, and the fact that this is the staging area while you're on the quest for the famous Adamantine Forge. It felt like a great checkpoint to an even greater side quest. Number 6, the Rivington camp, also known as the one where Tav actually gets a bed for the first time. The main reason this one is so high up is because it has the charm of the port campsite, but with isolation. The outskirts of Rivington is also one of the more peaceful areas in the game because it doesn't seem like the main danger has yet hit the city. Therefore gets some nice narrative points and adds to the immersion. Wait, I gotta be honest now. I don't know how many times I've used the word narrative and immersion, but we are after all reaching the end of the list and therefore the end of my vocabulary of describing something as important as campsites. Number 5, the Worm's Lookout campsite. The one you get during the Act 2 and Act 3 intermission. Located just outside the city of Baldur's Gate, it has a watchtower, castle walls, and the snake-like layout is nice and cozy. Just a damn shame we only get it once before reaching Rivington. I thought for a good while that this was going to be the main staging ground for the gang to use, but it fades away faster than it takes one of those Githyanki monks to beat your ass in one turn. Number 4, the Underdark campsite. Really brings that fantasy vibe out there, you know? The great lighting and abundance of natural flora creates one of the best atmospheres in the game, and setting up camp after meeting one of the newer enemies feels like a well-deserved rest, while realizing you just took a big step forward in the game from the previous more peaceful area of the Emerald Grove. New dialogue is opened up here and the music is nice. I don't actually have any negative points about this campsite, and the only reason it is number 4 is purely because the top 3 are just a little bit better. Number 3, the Elfsong Tavern campsite. I don't even know if I want to call this a campsite. You basically just book a hotel suite and damn does it look and feel good. If you didn't know, you can rent out the floor at the Elfsong Tavern in the lower city, as you need to pass a persuasion check and make a one-time payment to the owner of the tavern.
If it gets a bit too noisy at night, well, don't sleep above a pub.
This campsite is also probably the closest we are going to get to buying a house in Baldur's Gate. I also love the fact that it is a real location in the game world where the floor even matches with the rest of the tavern's layout and the nice architecture. Also, does anyone know why there is this portrait of a Githyanki in this sophisticated style? Number 2, the very first wilderness camp. Larian Studios giving you the first campsite that is this nice and cozy is the equivalent of showing the Death Star on your first part of your trilogy. I mean, how can the other campsites even compete? Many will like it because of its similarities to Dragon Age Origins, and the vibe that this is your first checkpoint on your way to embark on a massive journey while dynamically filling up the camp with new companions, gives this campsite a strong number 2 spot. It also gets an unfair advantage in the form of massive amounts of dialogue and affinity meter progressions that happen at this campsite compared to the others. In my first playthrough, I thought this campsite was the only one you get in the game, and I'm glad Larian made more, but to be honest, would you even complain if this was the only campsite in the game? And number 1, the Mountain Pass campsite, which you can get when resting at the Mountain Pass outside the crash itself. Resting at this campsite the first time was one of the more memorable moments I had in the game. It has one of the best campsite scenic views on the cliffside, and the ruins add a hint of mystery, and excuse me if I sound cliché now, but adventure feel to it. It also is the campsite where Lae'zel's personal story gets deeper, and her inner conflict with the crash and Blackith becomes the center point. Lae'zel is also purposefully located on the edge overlooking the beautiful view, making it an unintentional incentive for the player to further interact with her, since this is the start of the game where her story really progresses. And going from the long battle sequence against the Githyanki to resting at the mountaintop overlooking the sunset makes a nice, cheesy but very cozy ending of otherwise a great area in the game. So, did you agree with my ratings? What do you feel like should be the number 1 spot? Tell me in the comments below, as I love reading all of them. I'm also working on another hidden details and interesting facts video, which should be coming out soon. And as always, thanks for watching.